Don't make any noise. You look at the eyes.
Yeah.
Creepy.
Spooky. I have 5:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. I think Linda is on her way. Call to order the October meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors, and thank you all for being here at City Hall. Thank you for the signage coming in, so that we knew how to get to this room. And I note I learned last month that this is Kendall's favorite place in the city. I don't know if this is your favorite room, but
Oh, no, no, no.
favorite place in the whole city of Alexandria. So we leave here in your honor. I'll ask the board secretary if she'll call the roll.
Chair Kaplan.
Here.
Vice Chair Price.
Here.
Linda Bailey. Brandy Collins.
Here.
Kendall Taylor.
Here.
Matt Harris.
Here.
Hillary Orr.
Here.
Ajaysha Thomas.
Present.
Merritt Amay.
Here.
Jesse O'Connell.
Here.
Okay, Chair Kaplan, you've got a quorum. We have 9 out of 10.
Thank you. Before we move into public comment, Josh shared with me as I came into the room some very sad news about an employee's passing, and I'll let Josh share with us some information about the employee and his remembrance. He had a very long career at Bench.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly, we were all shocked this weekend to find out that our foreman, one of our maintenance foremen, Mercer Crowder, passed suddenly on Saturday afternoon of a heart attack. He served at Dash for 32 years, and he has been the foreman of the night crew. So he often would come in the afternoons, and he is much to the credit as to why our fleet is in such great shape and so well cared for. Wonderful man. His services will be tomorrow, so we will have staff allowed to go and visit the family for that. And his daughter actually works for us, and she was recently promoted at Dash as well. So our thoughts and prayers are with their family. So I just wanted to share that with the board since that just came up.
Thank you, Josh. And as we often do, we'll take a moment of silence to remember Mercy. Thank you. Thoughts and prayers with his family. All right, we will go ahead and move into public comment. Let me also announce before we do so, I'm going to move the budget priority letter up to be taken up directly after Duke Street in motion, because there's a meeting actually about Duke Street tonight. I know Hillary wants to or needs to attend that, so I want to make sure she's here when we discuss that item. So I think Josh has arranged the slide deck accordingly. So we'll move into public comment. I have to only look this. I'm used to looking at the slide. So it's behind me. So we have the public comment rules that are here. I know we have some speakers that are here in the room, and we did receive correspondence from a number of community members in advance of the meeting that were emailed to us, and we have them here at the table as well. Copies. The clock is up here for 3 minutes to speak. We'll recognize folks in the room who asked to speak first. Do we have anybody on Zoom who's pre-registered to speak? No.
We have one attendee hand up, so you may, if you would like to do Zoom first, or you'd like to.
Oh, we'll do that after the folks in the room, and then we'll
do that.
query the room if there's anybody else who wants to speak, and then we'll query the Zoom if there's anyone else who wants to speak. If you haven't already and you're on Zoom, please raise your hand so that way staff will know to recognize you. So we'll go ahead and call the first speaker who signed up and is in the room.
That is Jim Durham.
Jim, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jim Durham. I live in the Seminary Hill area, Alexandria. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I sent a letter earlier today asking you to include that service expansion enhancement as an operating priority in your fiscal year 24 budget. I won't repeat everything in that letter, but I just want to maybe further explain the basis for that request. About 4 years ago, I served on the stakeholder group that developed the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan, and I came to really view that as the transportation vision for the city. It is the premier plan, and the Transit Company Board approved that in 2019. But to me, that board approval indicated the board's commitment to continue to work through that. We knew at the time that it would take more funding, and there's not always more funding available. But the commitment was every year we try and move forward. And right now, my ask is to continue to move forward with funding the unfunded increments for the fiscal year 22 version of that plan. Is more further out 2030 version of that plan that's down the road. And I fully appreciate there are other significant city financial pressures. There's with just from the national loan, there's the collective bargaining agreement and other issues coming up. But that shouldn't stop the board, in my opinion, from supporting the vision by including in the letter. We have a new city manager. He needs to know that it's still a priority with you. That's not just something, some plan that's on the shelf. The only way he knows that if you include it in the letter officially. The newly elected members of council all campaigns on being transit advocates wanting to spend more money on transit. So I know I've talked to Ms. Orr about this. I know it's a huge part of the budget. You know, TNS, it's swamping the TNS budget, and I'll tell the story quickly if I can of having worked as a defense consultant, where the Navy needed to recapitalize the undersea arm of the strategic nuclear forces, and naval operations reactor, something like, well, what do you want to do? Stop building carriers for 20 years? How does it fit in my budget? Well, the answer is it doesn't fit in the Navy's budget. And so this doesn't fit in the TNS budget per se. So I understand the reaction similar to the naval operatives the TNS might have, but
30 seconds remaining.
doggone it, we got a council that's committed to this. We got a city manager that I think will listen to that council and at least identify it as an event on your list. Thank you. So I asked the board to update your letter to include the amendment service enhancements to implement the fiscal year 22 transit plan. Thank you very much for listening. And appreciate your consideration of being consistent with the board's. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And I just wanted to commend you. You're a member of our Dash Rider Advisory Committee, and appreciate your service for that. And also that you had shared with me that you organized the delegation of residents, mostly on the west end of the city, who went and actually spoke with the city manager and shared their passion and commitment.
People meet with city manager on this. This was the headline topic. Yeah.
But and I appreciate that advocacy is very important. So for the community, thank you for that. All right, we have other speakers in the room who are ready. Do we have other speakers in the room who had pre-registered? Is that enough? Okay. So we'll recognize the individual on Zoom who had his or her hand raised.
I believe this is Bonnie O'Day, and Bonnie, it would appear you are now able to speak.
And I'll let you know, Bonnie, we did receive your email and have that here at the table.
Okay, great. Well, then I'll just be really brief. I would just like to encourage the board to request additional funding for the city manager's FY24 budget to include enhancements to the Dash system. I use the line 31, which runs down King Street to Old Town. I use it quite frequently, and the enhancement would extend off-peak and weekend trips from the King Street Metro to Braddock Road Metro, which would increase the or reduce the headway in Old Town. And I use the bus to conduct lots of things in Old Town, including going to city council meetings. And the bus on Braddock Road Metro goes through Old Town and passes by many of the places that I do business. So having a frequency of 15 rather than 30 minutes would increase the efficiency of using the bus, because I would be able to avoid the transfer at the King Street Metro. So I would just encourage you to request additional funds as outlined in the ATVP, to make the buses much more useful for people throughout the city. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bonnie. So all queries, is there anybody else in the room who would like to make comments? And we'll ask staff if there's anyone on the Zoom who has raised their hand in addition. Josh is shaking, so that's likely. Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Thank you, Ms. Durham and Ms. O'Day for your comments. We'll move on to the consideration of the meeting minutes from September 14th that were included in our packet. Are there any revisions, additions, set of corrections? If not, I'll take a motion for adoption. So moved by Matt, is there a second? Second Jesse, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? All right. So we'll move into the chair's report. I wanted just to say at the outset how much and I think Josh will talk about this in his management report, how much I enjoyed being a part of the employee picnic. Adesha and Panic were there as well. Hillary was there. I got to meet her kids. I don't know. I met both of them. I think I hadn't met your younger one before, so that was really fun. And actually a lot of our elected officials were there as well. And there was a rodeo component as well that I know Adesha and Panic were able to watch. And it was just a really great spirit, and it was so nice to be back for that event. So my kudos, because I know Martin's team and marketing communication worked very extensively to put that together. It was a really nice event. I was just glad to be part of it, and just it felt normal again to have those kinds of gatherings. And I hope it was very meaningful for the employees where the food was good too. Also included in the packet is, and I had promised this over the summer, that we would develop a public speaker policy basically, and this is part of kind of an overall reorganization of some of the board member policies and kind of developing a board handbook that really is kind of useful. And this is an important component of it because we don't have anything in writing that kind of addresses how we do public comment. So it's really kind of a two-piece policy. One is kind of just fleshing out how public comment will work, and a lot of it just procedurally, so that way staff kind of knows, you know, this is how we administer public comment, and members of the public know this is what I can comment on and this is how I participate. And the second, and I have to give credit to the school district I grew up in New York, their Board of Education has a statement that they read at the beginning of public comment that just says, this is why we take public comment, this is how it's helpful to us, and this is kind of how you can engage with us. And so the idea is that that statement at the bottom of the policy would be read by whoever the presiding officer is at the meeting, at every meeting. And so that way we're saying something consistent about public comment every time, and we're setting a tone for what people should expect as well. So that was kind of the spirit of this. Josh and Beth worked hard to kind of take my vision and create this and kind of dovetail with city council policies as well and other transit systems. And I think it's a good document. My intention was to allow folks to kind of digest it for a month and that we would pass it in November. If you have comments on it that you want to share now or thoughts, happy to take those, or if you want to share those in advance of the November meeting so that we can kind of bring those, but want to make sure this is something we're all comfortable with going forward.
I think it's great. In terms of like the no expectation of responses from the board. I remember during the organizing days with the ATU, it seemed like they were trying to elicit comments. Is there just a blanket prohibition to protect the board or the members, or can board members respond?
That's a good question. So that was, I think, to kind of set the expectation that we're not going to respond. However, we can have brief exchanges and we can open the floor up. But I think the idea is more for us to listen, and wanted to kind of set that tone kind of going forward, not to say we're going to engage in a debate with somebody. I think also, you know, sometimes we get kind of very routine questions about service where we can, you know, staff can answer those in 30 seconds, and it just makes sense to do that for efficiency's sake. And so I think it would be at the kind of discretion of the chair if we wanted to say, hey, staff, do you want to answer this? Or if you as a board member wanted to ask a question, that would be, or engage with a speaker briefly, I think that would be fine as well. But just kind of to say, well, you know, that's not really why we're here and what we want to do. There.
Looks great. I think.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah. Is there any other comments on the policy?
David, the one thing I would say is I also think it looks great. I'm really glad we're doing it. I think the sort of, you know, clarity of expectations gets to good public dialogue. Only thing I might want us to kind of think a little bit about is the notion of a 3-minute rebuttal time, just because I do think public comment in settings like these are more kind of like, I'm sharing my ideas with you, as opposed to actually like having someone else step up and say, I disagree with that person, right? Like, I think just containing everything within 3-minute statement, 3-minute statement, 3-minute statement, as opposed to a formal mechanism where someone could be like, I'd like to rebut that for 3 minutes.
Could I say, actually don't have it in front of me right now, but it's okay. So I
So
get
the
to see what
time heading.
the time heading. You're saying the 3 minutes will speak only on an agenda item, and then 5 minutes is forwarded to certain civic officers, but then below that.
I would
may
just
allow
strike
for
that,
vote.
I would just strike that
Okay.
paragraph. I mean, that, again, that's one person's perspective, not everyone's.
I would be comfortable with that as well, taking that out. Because yeah, we're not really here to engage, and you're right, that kind of then defeats the purpose of what, Matt was just asking about in terms of us being here to listen as opposed to rebut. So I'm comfortable taking that out. So we'll take that out for November.
Yeah, I agree. I like that change, Jesse, and I think this is a good document. One thing I will just throw out there for consideration, we can talk more in November if people want, but some of the other boards and commissions that I work with do have a time limit, just to keep things moving, where we have 10 or 15 minutes for public comment in the beginning. And then after that, either the board can, if there's a couple more people say, yeah, go ahead, or kind of call it and people can do written comments or wait till the end of the meeting, just for being respectful of board members' time. So we have made that shift on a couple of the boards, and I know council does the same thing, but I just wanted to throw that out there for discussion.
I was intentionally agnostic and not putting that in there because I've been on both sides. Because I want to run an efficient meeting, but I've also been an advocate who I found if I'm fired up about something to come, that it could be better to just let folks talk and have their opportunities, opposed to kind of the simmering tension that grows as take up things that the members of the public may not feel are relevant. So I didn't want to include that in the policy, but I do think that there can be value in that, and city council seems to have made their time limit, which I think is about 15 speakers that they take. They seem to have made that work pretty well, and it doesn't seem to have been an issue. So I mean, we could do something similar to that. We don't often, and you and I had an opportunity to talk about this too. And we were talking about, well, a lot of our speakers come on public hearing items where we're going to have to take everybody who wants to speak in order anyway, as opposed to public comment. But if they're, if folks feel like there's a need for that, or if you want to kind of see how this works, and if we have then a number of meetings where we get bogged down, we want to say, what, I think we do for efficiency's sake need a time limit, we could revise it at that point. But I'll ask for the direction from the board as to whether you want us to put something in the initial policy or leave it as is.
I would put it in the initial policy. I thank you, Hillary, for bringing that up, because that's one of my concerns reading this too. Just for efficiency's sake, just make it a policy. That would be my vote.
Do you want to dovetail with what council does, or do you want a different?
I mean, first, if you figure out what council does, that may work.
Okay, there's this 15 speakers, and then everybody else is at the end. So that would be, if everybody took 3 minutes, that would be potentially, that could be an hour, if everybody took 3 minutes and you had 15.
And Transportation Commission does 10 to 15 minutes, and some of the other boards and commissions do too, and then they decide based on how many people are remaining. If they wanted, if there's 2 or 3 people, they'll usually say, just go ahead.
Okay.
Okay,
So
so
15 minutes total.
That might not be enough. So
15 would give you 5 speakers.
if they take up the full 3
If
minutes.
they take the full 3 minutes, although I wouldn't want to then penalize someone else because the person before them was long-winded, but I would prefer a limit on number of speakers as opposed to saying a time limit. But you want to do, I guess, if we did 10 speakers, that would split the difference between the two, and then we'll see how we can revisit it if we find we're getting lots of interest, and maybe we need to extend it.
To clarify, this is just for meetings, not for public hearings.
Correct. Yeah, public hearing, we have to take everybody. And so I know in the past and the spring, we had some individuals who came for a public hearing, but then took a second bite at the apple too, which, this would discourage them being able to do that, basically speak on the same item twice as well, because there would then be a limit on how many people could be heard.
So to be clear, this is, if there is a public hearing item, you can't speak during the public comment on that. You have to speak during the public hearing for that. Is that, I don't recall if that's outlined in here, but I know that's how council does it, right?
Well, we say the public hearings will follow the same guidelines as above, but actually, and I think this was a conversation that Josh and I had when we were kind of sketching this out is it's very hard to, I think council struggles with this a bit too. Maybe I don't watch as many council meetings as I used to, but sometimes it's hard to like say, well, has this person veered directly into the public hearing item, or are they kind of speaking around it? And I didn't want to get in the position of then saying to the person, no, this is now you're speaking too much on this item. I'm gonna, yeah, because I'd rather just let, I want to, as a way to minimize conflict, kind of just allow people to have their piece, because then they finish, 3 minutes are over, they've sat down, we've moved on to the next person, and we've, heard what they said. I've also discovered here, and something I didn't maybe realize as much before when I was on the other side of the table, is that speaking more, that being succinct actually can be better in terms of getting your point across. And in terms of trying to have as much time as you can, actually can then detract a bit from your cause, because then it just becomes repetitive. But so we don't have that specifically in the policy, but we could. But I think it would be I feel like it would be hard to kind of
Police that.
manage that.
It'd be hard to police that.
Be hard to police that, because someone could, what point do you say, well, you've gotten into the agenda item? And
I mean, I think the traffic and parking board, it's usually pretty clear that somebody's saying, I care about this one issue, and it's very clear cut. And if it's broad, we just kind of let it go. But when they are speaking very clearly on an item, we say, okay, you need to wait until this public.
our
hearing.
public hearing item is usually the TDP and the budget, which is
Yeah.
very all encompassing. So it would be kind of hard to police that. Maybe with the speaker limit, we've then set aside enough time that it may be less of an issue, as something we could certainly revisit if it's becomes a concern of the board in terms of how the time is being used. But
So if we were to limit the number of speakers at the top of the meeting, instead of 10, would people be allowed to comment? Will we have a second public comment period at the end of the meeting?
I think
To
if there was
accommodate additional
demand, we
speakers.
would have to, yeah.
Well, as long as we have flexibility, if there's 10, 3 more, 2 more, it would be up to the chair's discretion to allow it to continue, but maybe having that 10 in the document itself would be a good starting point. I can't remember a time where, other than a public hearing during normal comment, we had more than 10 people. We did, it was a
I
rare.
think maybe once.
Yeah, we didn't happen very
I
often.
think once we did.
Mr. Chair, I was going to offer that one way, if the goal here is to avoid repetitiveness about a particular subject on those few meetings that you have a public hearing, it's your option to have a public comment period as well, where you would just simply say that we're going to devote all of the public speaking time to this public hearing, and then just close it. It's just an option. And just, if you're trying to find a logistical way to navigate the question of whether someone were to speak twice on an item. And I believe that council, for example, when they have a public hearing, they're not taking public comment separately.
Well, they do at the beginning of the meeting. They do on their Saturday public hearing. They always have a public comment before they to a hearing. I think the way we usually schedule this, and I know this is done at a convenience, is we usually have the hearing first, and then we have the public comment second. So if somebody seems to think that maybe something they're saying more, then they come back during the public comment, as opposed to us doing public comment where we say, if you're here for the hearing, speak after. But and I like the way we do it, because I think it's fair to people who want to just make their comment on the issue of the day and then go about their evening. But I mean, that's something we could do, but we often have a presentation before we have our public hearing too. So we would have to do that at the top of the meeting, and then before we hear from anyone. Because your team usually presents on the TDP or the budgets, that way people have the information. But I think if we start with the 10 and then we continue to have our public hearings that run basically the way we do, and we'll just make sure to specify that the 10 limit doesn't apply to the public hearing section of the policy. I think that should solve the challenges that we have. And again, this is a living document that we can take up as necessary. And it does give us, as several folks said, flexibility presiding officer to extend. Like if we have 11, I wouldn't make one personally, and we'll have to see then what the tenor of the meeting is. So we can vote on this. Well, why don't we, since we have several changes, why don't we recirculate this for the November meeting, and we'll the intention that we'll vote then. And Josh, do you feel that you've captured the changes? Need clarification on?
I think so, between Beth and I. We'll do our best.
Okay, so we've got that taken care of. That's all I have, other than just to again thank staff and all of you for your flexibility in trying out the Dash facility. Excuse me, trying out City Hall again and just seeing how this works here. And we'll have another meeting in November at City Hall, and then we'll be back at the Dash facility in December. And then for 2023, we'll alternate the sites. So that's all I have. I'll turn over to Hillary for TNS report.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. You want to do budget priorities letter?
Well, since Hillary has to speak on the
Oh,
other
after
items,
Hillary.
we'll let her do her reports, then we'll
All right.
take that on.
I'll get your quick report.
Okay, my TDS updates today are all on WMATA. So you all might have heard the news that Metro extended the closure of the 6 station south of Reagan National Airport. So instead of opening and switching to phase 2 of the Metro shutdown, where all the tracks are running blue lines, that was supposed to end on October 22nd. It will now be Saturday, November 5th. So the free shuttles and bus service will continue. I know VRE is having conversations about continuing their free service as well. In bigger news, Metro also announced simultaneously that the Potomac Yard Metro Station will not open this calendar year. It was intended to open around Thanksgiving. They have not given us a new date. We are hoping 2023. We do not have a lot of information on that, but that was very unfortunate news for us. And I know Dash had planned to reroute some of their routes to go up to the new metro station. So that is very unfortunate, and we will continue to work with WMATA to get that done. And then just lastly, staff met with Metro, and as they've been launching their bus network redesign, so there's going to be some public outreach efforts happening around the region. And in Alexandria, it seems like there's less outreach in Alexandria because they are taking a lot of the information that we gathered from the public when we did the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan. We did a ton of outreach with that and really got a lot of the same input that they're looking for the Metro redesign. And then of course they worked very closely with us on that bus network design. So, you know, we had shifted some of their routes with the ATV. So it's not looking like there would be more route changes in Alexandria, maybe some minimal changes, but it is would impact regional routes. So that effort is kind of kicking off this fall. That is it. So happy to answer I'll try and answer any questions.
Hillary, Josh, this question is kind of both of you. The delayed opening of the Potomac Yard Station, does that have any impact for us in terms of were we projecting ridership on that, you know, the rerouted routes that would have gone to Potomac Yard? We're now delaying that. Does that have any impact on like how we're, you know, staffing? We were planning to staff those routes or not, or is it kind of just minimal, you know, we're sort of aside from the overall impact of the city?
Yeah, so whenever we make a service adjustment, we have a bid period, and there's a certain time period that takes not only to build out the schedule and then to bid it in accordance with our collective bargaining agreement. So it does push us back. We're kind of operating on we're not going to do anything until you actually prove to us that it's done and that you're on track, because we could get burned pretty bad if we move forward and then it got pushed back. So yes, it affects us, but we're just kind of in a holding pattern, waiting until they give us clarity.
Anything else? Okay, well, I know I spoke last month a little bit about Duke Street in motion, but wanted to be prepared this month to give you all a bit more information about this project. So I'm just gonna kind of go through this presentation, happy to answer any questions, but really kind of getting into the what and the why of what we're doing in the process we've gone through, and then some of the upcoming engagement. So, Duke Street in Motion is what we're calling this Duke Street Transitway project. This is ultimately a bus rapid transit project, and it is focused on the bus between Weston, Alexandria and the King Street Metro. And of course, this project, while it aims to enhance the corridor for people that are riding the bus, in improving access for people riding the bus, we're also looking to make improvements for people who are walking or biking or scooting, however people are getting around on this corridor. It's all important to connect people to the bus. And of course, we did hear in our initial engagement that congestion was a major issue. So that's certainly something we're taking into consideration as we look at various options about, what does that mean for the travel impacts of people who are driving on the corridor. A lot of people use the corridor every day, and this project is really trying to balance the needs of all of these people, but also kind of creating this place that keeps Alexandria moving forward, is a place that people want to live and want to work, and that have options for how they get around. So this project began in 2008. We've been working on this for a very long time. And in 2012, there was a group that did a transit corridor feasibility study, and council actually adopted a recommended cross-section with that project. Then it took us a while to get funding, which we did. We have $87 million of funding for this, but by the time we secured the funding, we realized that we needed to kind of go back and revision with the community and understand what their priorities were, and if they still aligned with where they were in 2012. And a lot of them aligned, but there were some different priorities that came out of that as well. And so now we are working with an advisory group and with the community to develop alternatives and ultimately get to a final concept plan for what the corridor will look like. So the project, key elements, it's the whole Duke Street corridor. Transit is obviously the primary component, but bike, ped, vehicular elements are also addressed. In this phase, we're really figuring out what the kind of busway and the roadway looks like. But we'll also, as we get further along, look at station locations and amenity and operations planning and what types of transit lanes we have, and then how we allocate space for people along the corridor and what that means for people who are biking or, using whatever device we have in the future. We're really trying to think about this not in terms of how people are using the corridor today, but how people might use it in the future. And well, goodness knows, we don't know what's gonna be coming out of the technology industry and how people get around in different ways. So designing for that, and also trying to kind of coordinate with some of the signal technology that we have and are working on Duke Street and some current projects. So I think you all, know this, like, why are we looking at bus rapid transit on Duke Street? And really, we can move more people in a bus than we can in cars. And that's not to say we're trying to get everybody out of their car, get people to give up their cars necessarily, but we're trying to create options for how people get around and make sure people that if they don't want to drive, they have an option to have frequent service. We want it to be kind of a useful corridor that connects to Metro and also the new hospital and the other activity centers along Duke Street, and some new development that's coming in. And all of this, bus rapid transit, it's not just about how people move. I mean, we have a lot of climate goals in the city, and kind of getting people out of their cars and into buses is certainly going to help our help meet our climate goals and just create a more attractive and sustainable place. And we have that option with this project. I mean, looking at greening the street and where we can provide more tree canopy and better stormwater solutions as we redesign and rebuild. So there's a lot of benefits of redesigning Duke Street. And not to mention that the one thing we heard when we did the Alexandria mobility plan and kind of asked people about their least favorite street in the city, most people said Duke Street. So the one thing we can agree on is that Duke Street isn't awesome the way it is. So hopefully whatever we do, it'll make it a better place. So we kind of broke our engagement into a couple different phases, and the phase one visioning was really about understanding what people wanted out of transit on Duke Street and what their issues were, what they liked about Duke Street, what they didn't like, and how they wanted to get around and how we could improve the bus. So we did a ton of engagement, did a lot of pop-ups and bus stop chats, and had almost 2,000 responses online. And we took all of that information and we created our vision and guiding principles, which are really, we are using these as measures to look at the various concepts that we have for the corridor and kind of use these to determine how the concepts are meeting these guiding principles, and that'll help inform with the community input what options move forward for further analysis. And then now we are in the phase 2 of our engagement, which is really in the concept development phase. So we have the vision and guiding principles. The advisory group adopted those this summer. We have design elements, and we are in this month, we have 4 meetings, the first of which starts tonight. We have a recorded webinar online already. There's an online feedback form, and we're doing 10 pop-ups across the corridor to talk to people and kind of meet them where they are and start to get more input on the different alternatives we have, but also really trying to help people understand, if you look at those vision and guiding principles, it's yes, and it's everything. So we can't do everything everywhere. And if we can't do something, what are the trade-offs we have to make, and how do people prioritize those so we can figure out, what's the best, what are the best design options moving forward. So that's really what we're trying to get out of the engagement this month. So we'll also have some focus groups to dive into more detailed conversations with people about specific topics. But, I think one of the reasons I wanted to present to you all tonight is to just encourage you to participate. I mean, obviously we all care about transit. That's why we're on this board. Regardless of who ends up operating transit on this corridor, we know Duke Street is important for Dash. Whatever comes out of this is going to benefit Dash, and hopefully you all can reach out to your networks and just participate in these events and spread the word about the project, because there are people that are excited about this and love it. There are people that do not like it at all, and people are coming out on all sides of the issue. So I would just encourage you to participate and kind of help us get the word out and help get the right information out. I mean, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and just making sure that people understand what this is really about and what we're trying to do as a city is really important. So just wanted to give you all that background and answer any questions that you all might have, and hope you all will come to one of the meetings.
Do you worry this is gonna be like a Seminary Road on steroids?
Yeah, sure do.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what could we do as citizens to sort of alleviate that? Because I'm 100% for what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, Seminary Road, it just divided the community, and we don't want that, because I think ultimately we can meet a lot of the goals of a lot of different groups of people with this project. But I think, there's a narrative out there that the city already has a preferred alternative, and we don't. We're trying to bring a lot of options forward and really get good input on that. So I think just being a voice of reason and a voice of just making sure the right information is out there. We don't, as city staff, we don't go on the next doors, and we don't see what's on the neighborhood listservs, but you all are part of the community. You all probably see that. And so just making sure that we're getting the right information out there is important.
So one of the things, and Hillary and I had a conversation about this yesterday, is that, our board can be, we have a goal, which is to promote transit usage, convenience, reliability, Dash, but also other bus service as well. And so this falls well within our kind of portfolio, is that should our board now, because there's going to be a final decision by council, but there's a lot of work that's going, as Hillary talked about, is going in now that's going to really shape what they get. Are there things in terms of values of this project or attributes that we want to speak up for? And in very general terms, like we want the most reliable service. We want to improve the safety of accessing transit stops. We want to ensure that we have, service that is improving what's there now. This is our busiest transit corridor in the city already, even without any improvements that are there and a lot of challenges. You know, other things, would it be helpful if we sent a letter now to kind of TDS staff basically saying, you know, we are uniting behind these principles, and as the project unfolds, that also gives us, if we have, you know, consensus on that, opportunities to engage through letters to the editor, through testimony at public meetings and advocacy potentially for a solution that meets those goals. And so, you know, if there's interest in doing that, in addition to kind of promoting among our networks, which is, as always, so important that we try to get people to take the service, so they're getting kind of balanced viewpoints within the city that reflects, you know, truly what the city's population. We all have different groups and neighborhoods that we are plugged into and networks. But, you know, I throw that out there if that's something we'd like to try to put together, looking towards November, to basically endorse a letter that will say, these are things that we want to ensure are included in this project. What do folks think?
I have
Yeah.
a quick question to what you said, people said Duke Street is the least favorite. Did you guys ask why?
Yeah, that was one of our just like quick questions that we had with the Alexandria mobility plan. Congestion is a big piece of it.
Congestion?
Big piece of it. A lot of people just don't like the way it looks. A lot of people, the safety of it is not a comfortable street to walk on. It's not a comfortable street to cross. It's one of our highest crash corridors in the whole city. So all those reasons came up, but congestion was a big one.
Okay.
Which is why we've been doing 2 traffic mitigation pilots on Duke Street to kind of address some of those concerns up front that we heard. You know, people say congestion was an issue, like, okay, let's try and address those so that we can see how a bus fits in, you know, once we can help with the congestion.
So I have a comment on your question, and then I had a separate question for Hillary. But so you asked the sort of merits of writing a letter, you know, based on these principles. Actually, to tie it back to something that we heard during the public comment period, would we be, you know, even better served to go back and look at the elements of the was it Vision 2030 plan, you know, the overall vision plan, that sort of exactly the kind of, you know, guiding dash document that are most crucially aligned with these existing, you know, guiding principles of the project, and sort of lift those up, say like, you know, we are trying to get to these certain goals by this particular year. Here are the ways that, you know, this project will actually get us to reach those.
And we assumed that the Duke Street, that there would be a transitway built on Duke Street in that plan was one of our assumptions. So in terms of moving people, that was we didn't, I don't think, prescribed exactly, you know, where was it going to run, like center corridor versus service, but that there would be some enhancements to the service there. Yeah, so I think that's certainly a good place to start, and something a document we've already endorsed as a board that reflects, I think, a lot of what we would put in that letter. So we could certainly do that. I would like, you know, I don't want to, we have weighed into, as years have gone by, the board has weighed into more issues in terms of just beyond just simply running of the buses, but even just how do people get to bus stops, you know, equity in the community. And so this is, I think, is such a perfect issue for us to really, you know, be a leader on. And I want to make sure that we do that early on, because, you know, by the time it gets to council, then, you know, there's less opportunity to kind of yay or nay on the proposal, but to shape the proposal itself. This is the window to start doing that. So I would suggest we could have staff start to work on a letter with me that we can present to the board next month to endorse, that would at least say in general what are some principles that we want of the project. We'll have an opportunity then to discuss and finesse that, and then we're on record stating there are certain, you know, design elements that are important to us because of what they do for people.
And I would add that these are the high level guiding principles. If you look at in your packet, there's objectives listed under each of the principles. So it might be worth considering, you know, when you dive into the guiding principles a little bit more, what of those objectives align most with where we were trying to go with the ATV and the goals of that plan as well? Because I think there is a lot of alignment between some of them, but, you know, just saying safe, it's a little different when you dive into what the group said, this is what safety means in terms of this corridor. It looks a little bit different.
So Dave, are you thinking that this body would endorse one of the alternatives, or just endorse the guiding principles and objectives?
Well, I think from what I understood at this point, they're not yet at the point of picking alternatives. The guiding principles then will influence the alternatives. So we would be basically at this point saying these are guiding principles that are important to this project, which also then is more general as well. So it doesn't wed us then to saying it has to run this way. It just it has to try to accomplish this thing. So I think that actually is a good thing that we're kind of less, we'll be less specific at this point. So we can develop that, and certainly I'll be in touch with staff to work on that. We'll get that circulated for next month.
Jesse, did you?
Yeah, could I ask
Oh,
real
sure,
quick,
I'm
one question about this, which is tangentially related to the dash elements, but I was thinking about this before Murat asked his question, and now it's even more pertinent, because you mentioned congestion. Since you were looking at this whole corridor and you're thinking about the different options and both the ways, you said we have $87 million in grant funding to accomplish this, but we might be able to do more with additional funds. Is this an opportunity to model congestion pricing on this corridor as maybe not what we ultimately end up doing, but to see it as an option, to see what those resources would look like and how it might further incentivize ridership on the transit elements as opposed to actually, having people in their cars on the corridor?
It's funny, I had a conversation today, just thinking about congestion pricing in a way to think about how it could look in our region and actually the conversations we're thinking about partnerships with Virginia Tech and some of their tech teams and how we might interact and collaborate with them. So I hadn't thought of that. I don't know if there's necessarily funding with this project to do it, but I think we're putting up, we have an adaptive signal control as part of a project that will be implemented on Duke Street. And so, it's a corridor that's right for looking at things like that and thinking about it. So it might be a future project we could look at. It's a good idea.
Well, other than congestion pricing, could we do HOV3 or something like that? Because I get a little nervous with the congestion pricing and, economics, and it just doesn't seem like a fair principle. I get it. But maybe even HOV3 with the bus lane.
Well, I think that's something to think about. We're looking at different alternatives and the corridor is broken up into different segments. And what we've been saying is that the whole corridor does not have to look the same because the segments are different. Having mixed traffic is one of the options that's out there, buses and mixed traffic. It's probably the least beneficial for buses, but it has the least impact on the corridor in terms of traffic flow. So, should that come out of the plan that mixed traffic is the way to go, I think considering something like HOV is not a bad option.
And the other thing is, what I can't stand about Duke Street is the signage, the 3 lanes and then 2 lanes, the turn lanes and disappearing lanes, by like the giant over, it's aesthetically awful. It's functionally awful.
Tell us what you really.
Exactly.
I've tried to bike through there. It's like,
Yeah.
there is nothing redeeming about that road. Maybe the tars got value. I don't know. That's it.
But is there a way to, because from my perspective, a lot of the trouble is cut through traffic during rush hour, AM and PM. Like people, like on my end, on the west end, people are speeding through like it's the highway. And then when you get to this end of town in Taylor Run, it's like gridlock because everybody's trying to get out of the city and cut through. Is there going to be some discussion about like once this is built, like how can we get those folks to get out of their cars and like actually use the regional transit way, the regional transit so that they can hop on this and kind of how this can all be part of like the larger network to get people from cutting through the city?
Yeah, I think that's all a part of having BRT and having more frequent service, so people have other options and they don't necessarily have to drive. When we did the Central Alexandria traffic study, one of the recommendations was focus on regional transit, and because cut through is a problem, it's one of the things that we're looking at with the different pilots and how we can shift signal timing to kind of get people to take different routes and stay off neighborhood streets. So it's something we've been working on a long time. As you all know, a lot of it comes down to housing, right? Like if there's cheaper housing in Fairfax County, people are gonna, cut through our city. So having housing that people that live here and work here can afford is a big piece of this. So, there's so many reasons that people drive and there's congestion, and we're trying to think about all of them. And I think transit is one component of it, and certainly not going to solve everything, but hopefully it will help.
One of the things that I'll put my technical hat is the congestion pricing and HOVs is that it tends to, unless you have redundant roadways, it tends to send the traffic to neighborhoods and it creates induced traffic. And so it's again, I have to see a model. I'm presuming that you guys have a model and all that. I see, different alternatives and everything, but when you implement solutions like that, then the unintended consequences actually end up costlier than intended, obviously, and there might be a crossing point where you cannot reverse it, and things like that. I'm pretty sure those are part of that citywide study that you mentioned, right, or the regional.
Oh, those are just conversations.
Just
We
the
are not even
conversations.
close to anywhere near congestion pricing is
Yeah.
a huge undertaking that we have not been successful in the US in getting.
Well,
But it's, I think a lot of regions are thinking about it, and it's certainly see in Europe, it's, all over the place, so
Sure.
down the road.
So a little bit beyond the scope of the project, but actually some of the conversation about cut through traffic was making me think about this. I ride the 20, my parents live in Fairfax City. I ride the 29 frequently all the way down. And as bad as parts of Alexandria are with, we at least have sidewalks and you get out of the city very quickly, particularly going through Annandale. It's very, very dicey. I'm just thinking about, even promoting people, they can get to the west end of our city, but in terms of, I understand why people would choose to drive who live just even west of Landmark. And is there any conversation about sort of what the core is? Fairfax County sort of then looking and saying maybe we can make some improvements to our aspect of Duke Street, because there are so many transit passengers. The service itself has improved, but it's actually even worse when you get out of the city in terms of just crossing streets. And
There's a lot of regional conversations about more regional BRT and what that might look like.
but just even improving the streets, even improving the street overall, or is it just, I didn't know if they maybe had some interest because we're doing so much to make this an attractive transit corridor within the city. They could benefit potentially from some improvements as well on their side, but okay, but I'm guessing that's not, it's just something that occurred to me that actually might help to promote whatever service comes out of this too.
I mean, I think with redevelopment of Landmark is a big driver for things like that too.
Yeah, maybe that will spark things west of.
But speed is one of the objectives, right? This is gonna be like the way it is right now. It's on the higher speed corridor, right? It's not like a boulevard that you wanna bike and then shop and all that.
Well, speeding is one of the issues, why we have so many crashes there. I think
No,
you have speeding in
not
certain
speeding.
areas, and then you have you have congestion where you can hardly move in some areas, and then you have open areas where
Okay.
speeding is a problem. So, and then off-peak hours speeding is an issue, and that's when you see a lot of the more severe crashes on the corridor.
But I meant like the overall objective of the corridor is to move traffic rather than just stop traffic and people and let them shop and walk and mind their business. This is more like a utilitarian corridor that has speed as one of the functions, right? It has to be a high-speed corridor.
I don't think it has to be a high-speed corridor. I think we wanted.
But what I mean at high speed, I think I'm not explaining. I'm not saying 65 miles
Yeah,
an hour, but it's not like what you envision. It's not like
Boulevard.
chicanes and chokers and all that.
No, yeah, that's not part of this. I mean, think about Washington Street, right?
Throughput,
Like you have a lot of throughput, but it's still a nice place to be, and it doesn't feel like a place where you need to go super fast,
So that's
right?
the
Because
balance.
the design, yeah, it's about designing for the right speed and the context of the street.
And some of that might be like spreading out the congestion and not having a bottleneck where there's a lane drop or
Mhm.
stuff like that, so that you can kind of manage it. I was just today on a road that we just rode, I added in DC last couple of years ago, I guess now. And at peak hour, the traffic was smooth and steady coming in. Everybody was going, nobody was stopped, but it was just kind of smoothly running in. And not more than probably 25 miles an hour, but that's perfect for the city.
Yeah.
So, kind of wanting to have that smooth and steady progression versus speeding, bottleneck,
Yeah.
congestion, like one segment and then it disappears because people turn off or whatever.
I think we've got some direction on it. And I think it's a really good presentation and, definitely good luck with the meeting.
Thank
tonight.
you. Thank you. It's just one of four, first of four, so we'll see how it goes.
All right, we're gonna move into the budget priorities letter now. So this was included, I guess we can just quickly, if others had announcements or updates they wanted to share regarding other boards or neighborhood groups that you're part of that are relevant to us. Hearing none, okay, we'll go on to the budget priorities letter. So this was included in your packet, the operating priorities and the CIP priorities. This is to meet a deadline that I think is the first week of November to get input to the city manager on on what our budget priorities are. I will say this has not kind of been the end of the conversation because there will be teams that will be helping formulate the budget, and I understood that DAS will be invited to participate in meetings that help to come up with our budget submissions. So certainly we can continue and we'll be giving direction to staff as we move forward on what our budget will look like. But in terms of the goals here, this is what we discussed last month. I, would make one suggestion, and just this is in response to some of the community feedback that we have. We don't mention in our letter that we still have unfunded segments of the ATV, and we've heard from community members that are here that have already started to advocate for trying to fulfill some of it. And I wonder if we want to just through the letter to add basically just a chart that would just say, and by the way, here are the unfunded segments, the ATV, and here's what the cost for each of them would be. We prioritized them last year in the letter that we did to the spring that actually that resulted in the city council adding funding for the Duke Street segment. And I just wonder if, even if it's not a priority, if it's something that right now the letter actually doesn't mention it at all. And if it's something that we want to put in there, that because if community members want to go forward and lobby for this, we shouldn't just say, oh, it's we have our priorities for a reason, but we shouldn't just say, oh, this isn't still a continuing concern, because I think we do want to get there to have all those funded. This may not be the year for it because we have some incredible asks related to labor costs and state of good repair, but just a thought I would throw out there as a potential change to the letter.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes,
agree,
it's the
absolutely.
basis for future decisions that the city can make. And having breaking it down as you suggested, I think will allow them to make more informed decisions.
And I asked Josh if they would start working on with Edward to update the cost projections, because those were what we sent to the city was last year, but just so they have the information. And Josh, I don't know if you could speak to kind of where we are with that, or is there going to be a lot of change to that?
I would invite Martin to give us some sort of out-of-pocket numbers as it relates to the continued implementation.
Yes, I can provide just basic numbers. These are the same numbers that we provided last year. We haven't had any sort of increases for CBA cost or anything like that. But as you recall, we had 5 unfunded improvements for FY23. We were able to get funding for 1 through the budget admin process. The 30 improvements I'll talk about a little bit later. So we have 4 remaining unfunded improvements on line 31, 33, 34, and 32. Ranked in generally that priority order. And in total, it's about $1.5 million annual cost to operate all those improvements. So that's the ballpark we're talking about. We did have some additional improvements on line 30.
I'm sorry, that number again, I missed the number.
1.45 is the exact number. And then we had some additional improvements on line 30 that were slated for FY24 that would be bumped back as well. But that was an additional $1.8 million to bring line 30 up to all the improvements.
So the 1.4 million, is that for 31, 32, and 24?
31, 33, 34, and 32.
Martin, last year when we submitted this, there were also some efficiencies in low ridership routes. Is that anything that we would consider? Are there trade-offs we need to make in terms of if we want to advance some of the routes and provide higher frequency on certain routes? Are there lower performing routes that we would consider kind of reducing service?
Yeah, and that's a trade-off we could talk about. I mean, we're getting much better ridership data and kind of do a more granular assessment of which routes are better than others. And again, we still kind of want to stick to the AEC plan, but as we kind of start to get a couple years in and see what's working and what's not working, we can certainly do that. I mean, like 34, for example, is the lowest point route, but we are going to make a major change to that, when the Potomac yard opens, so we hope the ridership will increase there. So it's still hard to say right now.
And something like the 102, which we had said we would try for a few years, but now they also lost because the Mark Center didn't renew their contract where we provided the express service from King Street Metro. So that 102 actually becomes more important for making those peak hour connections. The only way you could say take VRE and then get over to the Mark Center currently on our system, which we didn't anticipate at the time we said we were going to try it because there were many in the neighborhood who said they were still depending on that transit. But that's like an example of a scenario where we might have looked, but that actually route has become a little more critical, at least during peak times, I would say. But it's a hard decision if we start to look at trade-offs, I guess is the point.
I would say Martin raises a good point. I mean, we have a new metro station getting ready to open. So seemingly we're going to connect more and more service into that station, which may drastically change the use patterns of some of the routes. So my underlying feeling would always be to exercise extreme caution wherever possible in regards to making assessments about routes, especially when you have major infrastructure improvements going on within the city that are potentially going to spur, right, additional utilization. Of course, always being behind the importance of advancing these projects and the new network, 100% behind that, just balancing and understanding the different priorities. It always, in my eyes, is a priority to try to ensure that our services that we provide today, we are able to continue to provide those services for people who rely on them, even if it's just a handful, because many times they're very dependent upon those services too. We would be very strategic. I think that's why you hear Martin being a little apprehensive about directly answering your question about trade-offs. And I appreciate him doing that because it is really a fine, it's a challenging pencil to sharpen when it comes down to it. So we would just want to be very careful and strategic about that and really involve you all and the public in the conversation.
I think the spirit of that question was to say, well, let's have a conversation. Say you want this other route. Okay, what might you have to give up if the revenue isn't there? And it's just because we know the revenue isn't limitless. So it's just to say, what are possibilities? And the answer may be no, we wouldn't want to do any of these things.
Sure.
Because of
And ultimately, the draft of this letter comes from my desk, ultimately with the input of my staff. And I just want to be clear with the board that we certainly, by not including the new network improvements, do not believe they are an important investment. We're just very aware of the significant cost factors that are coming in the coming year or two. And we realize it's a big lift. And it's a big lift in potentially a economy that at least the Fed is trying to slow down and shrink a little bit. So we just want to make sure we're agile and responsive to that in our priorities that we bring to you all. But completely understand and support the board, including a comment to the importance and the input that people have given in their letters and in their public comment is refreshing and appreciated because it is something that we on the staff level also feel is an important priority.
We were shown a chart last month that was kind of, I think it's where we are today and where we're going to go to. And that doesn't include any of this service expansion that hasn't happened, correct?
I think it does.
There was a color, I think it was the top color.
Top part.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was it was sort of color coded to show what the new network piece would be. But the blue part was the current services grew substantially over the years.
And that was,
without it.
right, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The blue part down below, that was the city part going up about 50% in 5 years is not with this.
Not
in that-
inclusive of
exactly.
expansion.
Just so, implicit in the need to expand some of these services is kind of the effect on the economy, right? The ability to move people to businesses easier, to spend money there, to get employees there so they can, business can expand capacity. Do we periodically try and do like ROI modeling to say like, if we expand this route, which costs this, it's going to return this to city, business taxes and whatnot? Is that something that is possible to model? Have we done that? Would we do that? Because we're talking about $1 million in service improvements, but if we're able to show that would drive a subsequent amount back into the city, it's a different conversation than just saying, give us $1 million unfunded grant, right?
I would say the answer is partially. And Martin can correct me if I'm wrong, because he was very, very heavily involved in the ATV planning, which took a lot of factors into consideration, including the economic benefits of transit. But you're right, it's an inherent benefit that we provide the community and an economic boost. One of the priorities that I've identified in the current year has been particular to data and data reporting and analyzing the return on investment, the cost per passenger, the relative cost to operate Dash, for example, as comparison to other services the city may pay for. Because we do feel like we bring a very strong value and we are a deal, so to say, in many ways, even though our cost goes up, we still maintain a high return for the investment. So I appreciate your comment and I'm fine with it. I think wherever we can look at that, we certainly will as we begin to have better data. And one of the greatest things, and Hillary and I were just kind of smiling about it, is this tool that Martin mentioned at the last meeting. That may seem kind of trivial in the background, but I think Hillary logged into it today and her eyes lit up. I mean, it's really fantastic what the technology is starting to tell us what we didn't have before. Before, it took us years to figure out stop level ridership information and truly where people are getting on and off. And we're now at the point where we're starting to get that data. And that's huge because it really tells you where the people are going, where they're coming from, and the potential impact on those corridors and those areas of the community.
And let me add to what Jess said. I mean, the school kids ride our Dash buses, and that's saving potential money for the school system in their own bus fleet.
I had a meeting with the new superintendent, the current superintendent of the schools, just about a week or two ago. Talked very much just about that, and have had conversations with others about how do we leverage Dash services, for example, to potentially help save the city money on the school bus side. Because you're right. Seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
Our buses are very popular, very full.
They
That's a
are.
good- That's a good thing. There are some logistical challenges there I won't go into, but that's another potential point, right? As far as return on investment.
Like capturing those numbers is, I think, really important for everything that we're trying to do and helping council make decisions about where to put money, being able to say, you're saving X dollars here, you know, and so putting it into Dash and expansion, you know, makes sense.
And we need to take a vote on the letter.
So, yeah, you would need to propose edits. It sounds like, and sorry, you had an edit too, right?
Well, can we talk about the CIP priorities? That are
Oh,
listed
yes,
here?
absolutely.
So I just had a couple of comments on this. So I thought that the zero emission with electrification of the fleet was our goal was always 2037 because we did not get low no. So we are buying clean diesels this year, and it was always a plan that we would continue buying clean diesel. I mean, we're trying to go after funding to electrify, but if we don't get that, we were still on track to meet our goals until I thought it was 2025. So did that change? Or is that incorrect that it was always 2037?
This may be my typo. But you know,
I think we over the course of the electrification process, we used both those numbers interchangeably because there was a lull of inflation. Specifically between 25. Yeah, 20, there's a gap of buses, there's a 2-year gap of buses that causes this gap in the 2 different years. So inherently, both these numbers are correct, and I think it is interchangeable which one we use depending on context.
As long as we're okay purchasing clean diesels until through FY24, if we don't, I mean, of course, we'll continue to go after the funding to electrify, but
right.
As long as that lines up with the number in here.
It may be worth editing because a bus is going to be on the road for 12 years at least. Oftentimes we see Dash buses on the road for 13, 14 years. So we're just getting ready to buy 10. We've already secured the production for 10 diesels, which will be delivered in the new year. So those will be on the road for 12 years, right? They have a 12 to 13 year life. So you're right. Thank you for catching that. From a staff perspective, I'm fine with correcting that to 2037. Especially considering that we did not secure the low no funds as we had hoped in the current year. So that certainly has pushed us back a little bit.
And just one other comment on the CIP. I don't know that the Dash, the current dash facility, are we considering it midlife? It, like, there's a lot of life left in that facility, and we are still trying to construct the new facility, and so I just wonder why that's a priority when we have, I think state of good repair is absolutely a priority, and then, you know, getting to a fully electric fleet is a huge undertaking, which also involves upgrades to the current facility and the new facility. And that's something we've been talking about and pursuing, went after with Lono. But I'm not sure I agree that the rehab of the current facility is would be a top CIP priority.
So I can speak to this. This means a couple of things, I think, in my view. One is the facility is a 30-year facility, right? So by design, it's halfway at this point, if you want to call it that. I realize the facility will be around longer than 30 years. It's not what this is intended to say. The facility has some substantial issues. It has some infrastructure that's failing, and most notably the deck, which is basically the entire part of the facility is continuing to decay at a rate that is alarming, to the point where we have structures that are supporting the deck due to failures. So I think somehow, whether you call it rehab and rehabilitation, or if you call it infrastructure investments in the dash facility, I appreciate what you're saying, but I would candidly say that I think oftentimes there's a perspective that the dash facility is brand new. And so why would you have to put any money in the dash facility? But there are some real problems, and I'm very concerned about them. I'm just trying to elevate them to the point of the general services and others are able to recognize there's some investments that need to be made to sustain the facility.
Just curious if you have like a structural report on the.
The city, ultimately it's a city facility. It's kind of a weird arrangement.
Yeah.
Because
I
we
remember
take care
you
of some
mentioned,
things and they take care of others, but yeah, structural engineers have been out to look at the deck, and there have been some pretty significant emergency repairs made. I think it's still clear and been a priority that has been clear within general services that deck needs to be addressed. I walk on it daily and see the condition that it's in. So I think, again, I think that this sentence, which did exist in the last year letter as well, is intended to bring to light the fact that there are some projects that aren't necessarily dash projects. They might be general services projects within the budget that should be prioritized because it's necessary to sustain the safety of the bill.
Maybe for wording, instead of saying midlife and then having a debate over what is the lifespan, just say like address, urgent structural issues or something like that, or just add that, just to be clear that there's like, it's not just like, oh, the paint is peeling or something. It's like more serious than that.
Yeah, I mean, we use the state of good repair language in the first bullet, and maybe try to use the state of good repair for what I'll call Dash's critical infrastructure, in this case, the facility, physical plant related issues.
Sure. Yeah, we can modify that that bullet point to better reflect state of good repair and addressing the structural issues. I don't have a problem with that.
Thank you for the explanation. That makes more sense. Support your-
I'm not talking about
support your
gutting the whole-
changes.
I'm talking about gutting the whole facility.
We got
and
enough work to
rebuilding
do
it.
on the new one, yeah.
And just if I could make one small suggestion, up with the operating priorities in number 3, I think number 3 is obviously very important to what we've done. And I wonder if weaving in a little bit of language that talks about maintaining a commitment to fare free service, sort of reminding city council, reminding the manager that this is something that we've promised this community and that we've really have made a big part of our plan. I think it's fine as written, but I think that you could read it to be like, it's free because that's what the grant said it had to be. And I think more like reminding them that this is a longer term, bigger picture commitment to provide this service for free, and that's going to take some action and choices and kind of dedicated effort on their point to make that continue to happen.
Certainly.
Other changes to the letter? So we need to kind of do a
I
motion
have one
that.
more.
Oh, yeah.
One more, so just the bit at the bottom, about the bus stop accessibility, this is what I talked about a couple meetings ago, and I mentioned that staff was working with, Dash staff, city staff and Dash staff working together. We were already doing an inventory. We have funding for, a number of new bus shelters. We have a transit access and accessibilities CIP project already. So I kind of felt like we had a really good, priorities, and this took away from it. Because it's something that's kind of already funded in the budget, so I wasn't totally clear why we were, including.
This was in our letter last year as well, because I mean, this has been an ongoing.
This was added to our
concern for
letter.
us. But I mean, yes, we have made, and I want to recognize we made a lot of improvements in that area. I think it remained in the letter because it was it's a continuing concern for us, but I agree the city is addressing it, so maybe we could change that to just dovetail that we support those initiatives that are underway. But that we want to, I think it's important that we continue to say bus stop accessibility must be improved, but that we support the programs that you highlighted, and we'll just go at it a little different way this year. Okay, I think we need to try to do a motion that captures all the changes that we made. But I know you and Beth have been taking notes along the way, so you might be able to help us.
Yes, and we're
Sure.
thankful for the recordings. They make a big difference when we're trying to piece this together. I'm not sure it's clear to me that we captured what the board's decision is about. I mean, I think you've clarified your edits to what's up there, but you haven't specified whether you want us to add language specific to the new network and ATV improvements. Would you like that added within operating priorities, or would you like it added in the bottom, kind of in a similar way to how we talked about bus stop accessibility, and highlight the importance of the new network and continuation of the ATV improvements? I guess that would be helpful to get clarity from the board as to what it is, if that's something that you want us to add to this.
Does the network improvements cut across both categories, or does it wholly live within operating priorities?
Currently, the network improvements that are shorter term, right, Martin, stop me if I'm wrong, are handled with current assets. So it's really all operating costs.
Okay. So
it is an operating expense.
I support adding a number 4 under operating priorities,
I think
saying
that's
that we, the enhancement of services for, and then call out the lines that are in the ATV that were priorities, but are currently unfunded.
Maybe we could then see chart that just has the amounts that we would just submit as, an attachment or addendum to the letter.
That's helpful. Yeah, we can do that. We can have that as item number 4 and attach the chart.
Okay, so. Do you want it, would it be helpful if you read back the changes as you have them, and then somebody could just say that's the motion, or should we try to come up with them?
I would offer that
By
you
one?
could ask the board to approve for us to draft it to you, and then for you to approve it to send, because it carries your line signature on behalf of the board, right?
Yeah, and was it November 3rd? I think.
Yeah, we have to get it between this meeting and the next.
Okay, no, I knew we couldn't bring it back, but we don't, it's not like it's due tomorrow, so, because I was thinking we could then just circulate it. Why don't we allow time to just circulate to the boards, that way if anybody has, so no, this didn't capture what I meant, we have some time to change that, as opposed to just me being the only one who looks at it. Would that be, I think we'd have time to do that and make the deadline.
I think that's permissible. What would need to happen is you just need to ask I could either ask the edits to be sent to Beth, or
I think have them come back to you, and then that way
And then
you
we'll
can
get a
then say to
final.
me, this is what I got, and this is, and if there's a large change, then we may need to send it out to the whole board again to review, but I think that way we can make sure we all captured what, as opposed to just me looking at it. All right, so the motion then that would need to be put on the table would be to essentially edit the letter as per the discussion, and then to recirculate to the board, and the chair ultimately to sign off on the letter with the edits that were discussed. But we don't have to outline what each of them were.
Yeah.
So.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board considers approving the development of the fiscal 24 funding priorities memo with the revisions that we've discussed during the meeting this evening, focusing on the changes to the operating priorities, CIP priorities, and the service expansion, that the chair be permitted to make any editorial changes required to incorporate the changes we discussed and have that available for review by the board members prior to submitting it to the city manager's office.
All right, moved by Steve, and thank you for taking notes on that. too. Is there a second?
Second.
Second of Murat. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? All right, passes now. So thank you so much and good luck, Hillary.
Thank you.
I'm done.
All right, we're gonna move into the general manager's reports. I know we also have some staff who are here to present on a wonderful leadership development program, and I appreciate all of you waiting tonight as well to we've made it through some of these discussions to talk to us about that experience.
I will try to move through my items with expediency for you all. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, good to be here. So my general manager's report starts with a recognition of a very important program that I prioritized. It's actually something we discussed pre-pandemic, and the pandemic kept us from being able to move forward with it. But fortunately, in the last year, we've been able to put it into place at Dash, and that was our first emerging leaders program. This is an opportunity for staff within Dash to learn more about leadership and to hone in on skills, express their interests, and be involved in projects outside of their regular work. So we have a full slate of folks who graduated. Not all of them are here this evening or on Zoom or able to join us, but I do have all of the names here on the PowerPoint. What I would like to do is to take an opportunity to recognize the individuals here that are lined up in the back of the room to come up to the podium here, if it pleases the board, to just briefly introduce themselves and tell the board who you are, what you do, and maybe a takeaway from the program, because we're very interested in your perspective and your experience. And I do understand there's also maybe one or two on the Zoom as well. And then once they're able to introduce themselves and what they do, to you all, we'd ask if you could momentarily stand with them to take a photo so that we could post this, because this is a really important thing. Frankly, professional development and opportunities and the expansion of your career, especially within transit, is important to all of us, particularly me. And I recognize that our industry doesn't have a great amount of opportunities. So the investment we made at Dash was a unique one and a new one. And we hope to do it again. So we'll let you guys come up in order that you're seated and introduce yourself and talk about what you do. And
hello, everyone. Lawrence Wade, Operations Supervisor here at Dash. Probably one of the newest motor supervisors here at Dash. I'd like to thank ATC Dash for giving me the opportunity to take this class as well as our trade class. It's very instrumental to me coming from working with my peers, becoming their supervisor, and the information that was given and everything that she provided was very instrumental to my development, to having to deal with my peers, supervise them, and still maintain the friendships that I developed while being a coworker to them. So that was just one of the many things that I took out of it. Once again, I'd like to thank Dash for allowing this class to come in and give us that great book. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm a supervisor on the crew. 10 years ago, when I joined Dash, I came from Africa, East Africa, Cameroon, Ethiopia. So Dash is my first time job, and I'm staying here over 10 years. So I never had this class before. Thank you for Dash. I'm so happy to have this class. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, my name is Frank Redondo. I'm a yard coordinator at Third. I always wanted to do a career in transportation. I started transportation when I was 21 and became a driver.
and always wanted to do a management position. And thanks to Dash, I came with somebody in the management position, and I'm looking forward to, keep going within the company. Maybe even Josh one day.
That's right.
No, yeah.
Very nice.
Just getting him service planning manager, work with Martin, who I want to thank for the investment in time and confidence and bandwidth just to allow me to participate in this program. It's a considerable undertaking for either of us to step away for 5 minutes and do something other than service development. And also Josh for providing the program. I have a small but growing team within the company and quickly approaching my 20th anniversary Dash. And my growth in the company has been organic and some here, some there, back and forth. And Terry's program was instrumental in helping me pull lots of different sets of experience together into a more formal approach for managing that team. And so definitely glad to be a part of it. Thanks a lot.
You're one of our more familiar faces because you've come to board meetings a lot, but you started as an intern, am I correct? Am I-
Yeah.
remember that correctly?
You started your career at 16, Frank started at 21, so that makes you the senior.
That's right.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Whitney Rose. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager for Dash. Thank you all for. I just appreciate the opportunity to be able to take this training. It gave me the opportunity to really hone my skills as a manager, think about things from a different perspective in a way that I had never done before. And I also would like to add that it gave me the opportunity to work with the guys in operations who I see in passing and say hello to and say a quick word to here and there, but it really gave us the opportunity to work together as a group to learn each other a little more. So I really appreciate the opportunity, and again, thank you to Martin for submitting me for the training.
We have James and Shauna Lee on the Zoom. I know they've been waiting for a long time. Hopefully they haven't walked away from their computer and given up. But James or Shauna Lee, are you there and would like to unmute yourself and speak to the board?
Hi, I'm Shauna Lee Williams, and I'm the HR supervisor. The program was absolutely great for me. I'm still working on a few things. So one of the big takeaways for me was to actually look at different situations and try to understand how it impacts the company as a whole. A lot of times we look at certain things, how it impacts, me as a person, or maybe just my department, but actually just taking a step back and looking at it, from the top down. And so that's something that I'm working on, definitely working with my team members, getting, their perspective from different departments. It's an overall great program, and I believe that all our, emerging leaders should go through this program. So it was absolutely great.
Thank you. Thanks, Shauna Lee. And James, are you there, James?
Yeah, hello. Can you guys hear me with this one? Yeah, so I'm I'm James. I'm the maintenance support specialist. I joined this leadership program thinking that I will experience and see what my growth and passion can do throughout, I guess, my career. So this helped me through with confidence and more learning experience. So yeah, that was a big step towards what I'm doing now, and getting to work with more people in each department, seeing what I can do, and hopefully I'll continue to grow more.
Awesome. Well, thank you, James. Eric?
Yeah.
I don't see him on this.
Might be as a panelist.
No, it's not. He may have dropped off, but well, anyway, members of the board, I just want to thank all of the folks who went through this program, and for you all taking your time to come this evening as part of my presentation. You all are the future of Dash, and we really appreciate the time that you invested also into the program. So it's a delight to support that. So if you all don't mind, Whitney, you'll have to guide us where you'd like everybody to stand, but if the members who are here in person, who are part of the program could stand, then we could just ask maybe board members to, we'll move the podium out of the way. And, yeah, of course.
Fantastic.
That's a lot of commitment.
Great.
If I could get half of the board members on this side, the other half on this side, and we'll have our emergency music.
So basically.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're all.
Make sure you have a line of sight before you go. There you go.
Can I get everyone to rotate towards me a little bit?
Thanks.
Josh, was that a Dash specific program or
Correct.
is it?
Yes, and it was developed uniquely for Dash.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, it was not a program that existed previously. So
Okay.
And is this the person that you recommended to manage our, facilitate
for
our?
the facilitator, yeah. Mhm. So again, we're really thankful for all of you. And for being here. So we'll move right along here. It's a long meeting. Also recognizing, and one of the individuals is also here this evening. On the 25th of September, which was a couple Sundays ago, we held our Dash Rodeo as well as our annual employee event and picnic. Thank you to Whitney and her team and everyone at Dash who helped pull that together. And thank you for those of you who were able to make it. We really appreciated seeing you. And all are invited next year. It's a great event. We did hand out our awards, and then you can see here the award recipients for customer service, maintenance employee of the year, as well as a new award, which is an all-star for our all-stars at Dash. And it is named after the late Courtney Kane, who was a longtime supervisor and inspiration at Dash, who passed away a year ago in December. And of course, the last one here is our Dash Difference Award, which has been around for a long time, recognizing the late Joyce Stallings. And Alex was recognized as the recipient for that. So a round of applause. Really proud of all the accomplishments that we've had at the workforce, as well as the rodeo. And these are the winners here. Our first place winner was also the winner of the state competition, and he is waiting for whenever they have a national rodeo again. He will go to represent Dash as well as the Commonwealth, but they keep canceling that event, so hopefully that will happen soon. Second place was Clarence Jackson, who I actually competed against when I was a driver. And then Chalachu and Zacharias were third and fourth respectively. So very proud of them, and I will just point out that I was fifth. Yeah, I do have the paperwork to prove it.
Well, Dr. You told me that you lost points because you didn't have a uniform, so you didn't go to uniform.
I didn't have a uniform,
You were-
couldn't take the quiz or the defect bus, but on the driving portion, I was good.
You told me you thought you might have been, well, I don't want to start your fights. You told me you might have been first or second if you had gotten to do.
Hey, who knows? I don't know. I might have been a worthy competitor for a long time there. Let's see. We did have some admin folks go through for fun. They can't compete. It's a driver only event, but we had some time and we sent our administration team. We had a friendly competition. I think I've got some bragging rights now. Stephanie competed, Martin drove through, and so did Ray. So anyway, moving right along.
Insurance.
Sorry. We're all licensed. We're all licensed. The last part of my update here, of course, is the 1-year anniversary. We're very fortunate and thankful of the investments the city's made in the new network, and it has certainly been a monumental success, as Martin will show you. As well as just pointing out that within your packet, I included a board calendar, thanks to Beth, as well as the rest of the staff who helped us to assemble all of the key dates. Some of them are tentative and draft. They have to do with the city's budget schedule and whatnot, so there may be a few changes as we go along, but that generally gives you an idea of what we're going to be dealing with month to month throughout the year. So hopefully you'll find that as a helpful addition to your packet. Unless there are any questions, I will speed right along in the meeting to Edward.
Right, thank you, Josh. Members of the board, I'll give a quick update on our year-to-date financial situation. So through the end of August, we had a year-to-date deficit of $195K with a projected year-end deficit of $45K. I'll mention that that is based on 2 months worth of data. And so as we continue throughout the year and have more data to build trends off of, we'll get a better picture of that year-end number. I want to explain the difference between the year-to-date and the year-end projections. That is due to the timing of reimbursements on the I-395 commuter choice grants, the cost of which hits our budget as we incur it, and then is the reimbursements offset those costs. And so those are now done on a quarterly basis. So as those get applied, that brings down the costs over time. Year to date, the most significant items of note were operations costs. Looking into the things that have impacted that, operations overtime continues to be high as a result of operator shortages. That was $135K over budget in August, for example. Then as a result of our efforts to achieve full operator employments, we're increasing operator training class sizes. That has led to higher operator training costs versus what was forecast, but with the ultimate goal that achieving full employment will help reduce those overtime costs. The other item is still our most significant fiscal pressure on the budget, and that is the fuel costs. That continues to be higher than forecast, and we expect this to continue throughout the year. Just to point out, our budget target was $2.40, and when we built the budget last year, that was fairly conservative. We are currently experiencing, as of today, actually $3.95 per gallon for diesel. And just to give you an idea, between the time when the packet came out last week and then today, that has gone up 39 cents. So this is, we do project that this will be an issue throughout the year. Our current projections, building off of that increased price per gallon, have us ending at $290K over budget for fuel costs. This is a summary of all of kind of where we are year to date and then our year-end projections. I'll point out that the year-end projections for operations, despite what I mentioned about overtime and all of that, once we start to apply those 395 commuter choice grant reimbursements, we're only projecting a very slight year-to-date, year-end overage on operations. And then you'll look at, you can see the maintenance line item, maintenance expenditures, the variance is just under 140K, and that is because of those fuel costs, and that's where those fuel costs fall. So year end, we're looking, as I mentioned, 45K deficit, but that is based on just 2 months worth of data. And as I mentioned, as we continue out through the year, the items that are impacting this projection, especially wages, site operator, employment goal, will give us more insight into where that year-end projection truly is.
Like we're $3 all FY23, right? It says.
Oh, yes, sorry, that is FY 23, thank you for catching. And that is my update for now, so I will open up to any questions at this point.
Just for, sorry, I was just say, just for those who are newer to the board, Edward is learning a lot. So the budget, he didn't start the budget. Edward had sort of inherited halfway through, kind of like the current city manager kind of picked up a budget that was handed off. So he and I have been talking a little bit about where some of these expenses are falling. So for example, you pointed out the training piece. It's kind of weird how it's set up within the budget. So we're looking for more efficient ways that are going to be truly more reflective of where those expenses are landing for the coming budget cycle. So we're making some tweaks. Yeah,
Are you
sorry.
blaming Evan already?
I didn't use a name, did you?
Well, he quit last week.
I
so
know.
Whatever.
In the city?
No, he went to the airports authority. He wants to do transportation is his love apparently. And so, yeah.
Shouldn't stay away from transportation.
Funny.
But we do pensions and purchasing, like what more could you want?
The whole package.
Exactly.
I have a question about the overtime and then the labor costs in general. So I was wondering, are wages competitive with other bus operators in the region? And given that we're spending so much on overtime, would it be, is there some trade-off point where we say we should just offer a fair wage so we can retain and get more operators in it?
So the operator wages are based on our collective bargaining agreement. And so those are essentially fixed. There is the upcoming collective bargaining negotiations next year. What we have implemented, and it has seen some success, is we are offering sign-on bonuses. We are still experiencing through, I believe, attrition, it's kind of offsetting some of that, but that has been what we've rolled out to attract more operators. And we've seen larger operator trainee classes, as I mentioned. So we are seeing people coming through the door.
What do you have to do to get the bonus? How long do you have to stay with the organization?
So as an operator, that's paid out in two phases. One, it's there's a series of goals, but essentially halfway through the training is the first portion, and then upon graduation, assuming all goals have been met, that second portion for operators.
Okay, so you don't actually have to be a bus operator for a certain amount of time independently. You've already received those payments.
Correct.
It's because you haven't entered the bargaining unit yet.
And that's
You don't enter.
Oh,
under
because
the
otherwise
collective
you would have
bargaining
to
agreement until you
negotiate.
you're released from training and enter revenue service. So our incentives are only applied during the training period because that's outside of the contract. But to get further to your question, we are at the end of our contract. So other contracts have probably gone into place in the time that ours has been in place. So while usually in the first year or so, you're up towards more competitive, you start to fall off as the years go by, as others kind of overlap you.
Well, and also with inflation.
Correct. I mean,
So
it's
it's
been
kind of
massive
helped you
changes.
because it locks you in. But do the non-represented people get COLAs or are their salaries flat?
So we have all non-exempt employees are on a scale, and then we have pay grades within the rest of the organization that get COLAs and whatnot, yeah.
And what do you use for the COLA?
It's based on the budget authority granted us by the city.
Okay, and what is, I'm curious, because inflation's been so high, is it keeping track or is it?
So I think with this, what did we do, 4% this year? The city did 4.5.
4.5 for general schedule.
Yeah. Yeah.
Public safety had different amounts and SCP got nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, general schedule was 4.5.
So we generally model after that. The one big difference we were finally able to get done this year is that we implemented pay grades, which didn't exist previously at DASH. So now we have a pay grade succession process that makes it better for budget planning and other purposes. It was really, really hard. And it's a small subset of the organization, but it's still, the rest of them have scales, so we got everything aligned.
All right, if there are no further questions, we'll turn it over to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good evening again. So there are a few 4 planning updates I have here on the agenda, and then there's one marketing, big marketing update for our new website by at the end. So first, we talked about this briefly last month, but Dash did conduct a customer survey in July and August. This was an online survey that was available in both English and Spanish. The goal of the survey was basically, absent some of the typical ridership data that we could collect there, that we'll be able to see when we have fare collection. We wanted to try and get some insights into who's riding Dash, how they're using our service, or how their ridership behavior may have changed since the new network and free fares were introduced, and what other factors are driving any changes in their behavior. So we were able to conduct this survey. We got a total of about 825 valid responses. So a little less than we were hoping to shoot for 1,000. Part of the reason was that we had a significant issue with spam attacks on our survey in the first 2 weeks that it was launched. We were able to implement some additional security features and patches that kind of addressed that, but that was not before. There were about 2,000 invalid surveys that were reported.
And Mark, real quick, spam, like random spam, or like someone wrote a bot to advance their preferred outcomes in the survey?
I think it was random spam. I'm pretty sure. We were able to kind of through assess the IP addresses and kind of looking for.
It wasn't all saying the 34 should be on Fifth Street.
Yeah, so we got about 800 responses. So I guess the caveat I would provide is that this is good for providing some basic insights into who's riding Dash, how they're riding, but I wouldn't use it as a representative sample. Maybe if it's an online survey. There are some response biases, and you'll see with some demographics that we maybe didn't capture some of the underrepresented groups as much as we could. But we are doing a much more comprehensive survey that will be led by a consultant next year. That is to fulfill our FDA obligations for Title VI. So we'll be doing a much more comprehensive survey next year that we hope will really drive the demographics a lot of who's riding. So this is kind of a prelim to that. So speaking of demographics, this first slide captures the survey respondents. The first question in the survey was, are you a Dash rider or not? Do you currently ride Dash? And the way the survey was designed, the questions that followed were kind of based on your responses. So if you don't, you're not a current Dash rider, there's a certain set of questions about, why aren't you a Dash rider? What can we do to draw you in or make you convince you to ride? If you are a Dash rider, they have a lot of other questions about that I'll show you shortly. But so this slide is only for these people that responded. They are Dash riders. And of the Dash riders that responded, 87% live in the city, pretty even split between male and female, 53% white non-Hispanic, and 48% with household incomes of less than $75,000 a year. If you kind of compare this side by side with the city of Alexandria census data from the most recent census, it does skew a little bit more towards not as many minority representation, a little more male. I think the percentages are actually flipped for the city in terms of male versus female. And then probably a little bit higher income as well. So just something to be aware of as we go through these slides. And there is a document in your packet that does kind of provide some text background as well. Next slide just has some general ridership insights. Over 90% of the respondents are actively riding Dash. Of those, we found that 22% have started riding Dash in the last year, which I thought was really interesting. So 1 out of every 5 riders out there on Dash today has started riding since the new network was launched. And free fares started back in September of 21. And then 63%, so almost 2/3, have started riding since 2017, in the last 5 years. So a lot of new riders, which is a good thing. More than half the riders, in terms of how often they ride, more than half the riders ride Dash at least 4 days a week. And actually, I think that's my exact stat here, 15%, I think, ride 6 to 7 days a week, so pretty much every day weekends. So we have a lot of really loyal riders. And the last bullet there is just that almost 70%, 59% of riders said that they actually ride Dash more than they did before new Dash network free fares. So almost 70%, and of those, I think 34% said they ride a lot more, significantly more. So really good to see that, and I'll provide some additional color on that as well in a minute. One of the things that we really want to get out of the survey is to kind of dig into free fares and how the program has been performing in its first year. As part of the fare-free framework that the board adopted last year, we committed to doing kind of an annual review of how the program is doing. And so these questions will help inform that. We'll be bringing that back to the board at some point in the next couple months here. But so what we did for this section was we provided four statements regarding the free fares and asked the respondents to either agree or disagree. As an example, the first statement was, I use Dash more often now than I have in the past because it's free. And you can see 71% in the green agree with that statement. So really good to see that the free fares are indeed driving more ridership. Second statement was trying to get a sense of if fares were potentially reintroduced, what would be the impact? So if Dash cost $1 to ride, I would ride Dash less than I do now. So over 40% agree with that. So there is some decent elasticity. So if you were to reintroduce fares in the future, you could expect some ridership impact for that.
How do you explain that? Right-hand side.
So there is the 27% that say they disagree, that they would continue to ride that. They're not concerned with the fare. So if you started charging $1 again, they would continue to ride the same amount. Okay. So some of the potential negative impacts of free fares were kind of captured here. My bus is sometimes too crowded because it's free to ride. We were just talking about this earlier. There were, I think, 35% of respondents that agreed that at one point or another, their bus has been a little too crowded because of free fares. And that's something that we're working with operations. We're kind of monitoring very closely to see if there are things we can do to address that. But the vast majority, well, not the vast majority, I guess that's 47% disagreed and said it didn't see the crowd. And then the last statement was free fares had a negative impact on my feelings of comfort or safety while riding Dash. We did see about 30% agreed with that. So that was kind of raising a little bit eyebrow. But again, 51% disagreed. So just some different perspectives. And of course, we'll be digging in. There was a free response option at the end of the survey. So you can kind of elaborate on your responses and we're kind of digging through those now. And the last slide I have on the survey here was kind of the golden question that I wanted to know, and I've been asked a million times in the last year is, we're seeing these historic ridership increases. What factors are driving those the most? So what we did is we provided for the people that indicate that they're riding more now than they did before the new network. We gave them 7 different factors and asked them to rate them as either most important, very important, somewhat important, or not important. And so the folks that responded either most important or very important are shown in the blue bar. The ones that responded somewhat important or not important are orange. So by the way this graph is set up, you can kind of see that going from left to right, you have the most significant factor is increased frequency. We saw that over 80%, so said that was either very important or most important. And it kind of goes down from there, but more useful routes, longer service hours, and free fares for the next few most important factors. I would note that if you just kind of focus on people who said most important, free fares does rise a little bit. Increased frequency, I think 40% of people said that increased frequency was most important. Free fares was the next, with 35% saying it was most important. And everything else was below 30%. So
how many could you pick and say were most important? Could you say all were most important? Was there a limit?
Yeah, that was maybe something that we could have done a little differently. But yeah, you could technically respond most important to all of them. And you couldn't necessarily see all the factors before you started answering the question.
Oh.
So probably people did respond most to multiple ones. And then you can see kind of the other factors there: COVID recovery, going back to work. Higher fuel prices was not as impactful as we thought it might be, but it is still a factor. So that's the last slide I have on the survey. But there's also information in your packet. Any questions or discussion?
I have 2 questions, Martin. Thank you for the presentation. Sorry you guys had to go through all this spam for that. That sucked. Question, there was no breakdown between English responses and Spanish responses. What is that breakdown? And do you
Yes.
have that number readily available?
Yeah, I think there was about 70 Spanish responses, so I think it was like 750 English and about 70 or so Spanish responses, which is actually more than we usually get. Usually we only get a handful of Spanish.
Okay.
Obviously, there was a decent amount.
We didn't break 100 though.
No,
So, and the majority of our riders are Spanish speakers. So we might have to increase our engagement on that community. Second question, you said there's going to be a larger survey in the spring. Are there plans to do another customer survey like every year to get feedback as we're continuing to be fare free? Or like, what is that process going to look like moving forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We haven't discussed that. With this annual assessment that we're doing with the free fare framework, I could see us doing something like this. The survey that's in the spring or whenever we end up able to do it is really focused more on the demographics, and that's only required, I think it's every 3 years by FTA.
Right,
So that wouldn't be an every year thing, but we could do a smaller survey like this and perhaps learn from some of the lessons to get better representation next year.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Martin, I think at the last meeting you said that our current ridership level has exceeded that of the pre-pandemic ridership.
Yes.
So the observation that buses were crowded may actually be correlated to a higher degree with the free fare and say standing issues as compared to what it was prior to the free fare framework.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we have some hotspots for crowding, specifically around the schools. That's really where we see it the most, around ACHS, just during bell times. Beauregard Street has a few elementary schools that we do see some crowding in the morning. So I think there's really kind of hotspots that we're trying to address. Overall, we did have crowding back in 2017, 2018, especially when we had the free student rides program. So I think we're kind of at that same level as we were.
Because I know certain, and I'm sure it's line specific. I know when I would come back from my reverse commute, King Street on what was the number 8, you probably couldn't get a seat until probably west of Quaker Lane, and then for the eastbound after Quaker Lane, you were most likely standing during the the height of the commutation period. But most recently, say anecdotally, I really haven't seen anything, although I don't go in every day. But my commuting time is roughly the same time that it was before, so it probably is that line specific. And do we have any more information to perhaps identify where those hotspots could be?
Yeah, so I responded with 2 things. One line 30 specifically, I think we've seen a decrease in passenger loads because of the 20A being realigned down that segment.
I was going to ask you if that realignment from Walmart has had an impact on it.
I think that some of the riders are using 28A, since it's running every 12 minutes all day, so it's a pretty frequent service. And then to answer your other question, we were talking about our ridership tool earlier, Hop Group, that does have load data as well, which is something that we've not had. Before we had APCs, we couldn't have accurate load data. And APCs are the automated passenger counters that we talked about last month, but those also enable you to collect load data to see where your hotspots are. So we're able to kind of look at that a little more carefully. But really, it really is most of the schools for the most part. There were some kind of line 35 Beauregard in the early morning, like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. when we didn't have any trips. We did add a few trips back last fall to address that. But it's really around the schools is the biggest issue.
Thank you. And again, this information was very helpful to understand how the ridership is configured.
All right. Keep moving. So I intended this original item was about Potomac Yard, but Hillary has covered that better than I could ever. So I did want to slip in just a quick note about service updates for line 30. As you recall, our last year's TDP included the line 30 improvements that council was able to add. So we are now implementing those improvements later this month on October 23rd, the official date. So just as a refresher, you can see the two improvements shown here. First, weekday peaks. Currently, we have a system where the buses run every 10 minutes between Landmark Mall and Street Metro, and then half the buses stop at Street Metro and turn around. And then the Old Town Circular alignment has every 20-minute service. With these changes, all buses will continue through King Street Metro into Old Town, so that the Old Town Circular will have much better frequency. It'll be running every 5 minutes when you combine line 30 and 31 during the peak. So really high frequency service in Old Town, which is going to be great. It also has a benefit for the entire Duke Street corridor. If you're out there on Duke and Ridley or Fox Chase or the West End, instead of having to kind of pick and choose which bus you get because you're kind of factoring you'll have to transfer to King Street Metro, you'll be able to take any bus and just take it right into the city to wherever you need to go. So really great benefit there. Then on the other end, on weekends, currently line 30 has short trips on the other end that stop at Landmark and turn around, such that between Landmark and Van Buren Metro, we only have line 30s running every 60 minutes during weekends. So with this improvement, we'll be extending all trips to Van Buren Metro on weekends so that segment has 30-minute service, which would be really helpful and much more useful for them. So excited to introduce that. Finally able to do it. October 23rd, we're also going to be doing an event. I think you were all invited to it. I think November 5th, 4th. Okay. So hopefully you guys will be able to join us. I think the mayor is joining us as well, but we're doing a photo op. I think it's in Old Town. So just want to flag that for you guys as well.
RSVP to that if you're able to, or interested to come.
All right, and third item here is continuation of the KPI dashboard that we talked about last month. I think last month we just showed you a quick preview of one of the dashboards. We now have the first 3 dashboards. There are 6 total. So we have These were available in your packet as well, so hopefully you had a chance to take a look at them, but this is the safety and security dashboard, which basically, the main thing it tracks is events and preventable events. Events are typically collision, passenger incidents, property damage, employee injuries, or other safety-related incidents. So we really are careful to track those, and we have a safety committee to determine whether an event is preventable or not. So you kind of see the trend there. We had 5 in the month of August, 5 preventable events out of 27 total. Those were pretty similar to what we had previous month. In terms of comparing it to the amount of service we operate, the line graph does that. So it's events per 100K miles. You can see, I think the most important one is the yellow line, preventable events per 100K miles is heading downward. So we're down around 2 preventable events per 100K miles travel. So that's pretty good. I think in the future we may add some additional context to what's kind of a line for what the industry average is or something like that. But for now, we can at least compare it to the last 5 months. And then we have operator refresher training at the bottom, which is something that we try to work on with our operators that have been around for a few years. We had a lot of staffing turnover in our training department, our safety department. So the last few months are a little lower than normal, but in August we got back up. So that'll continue to rise. The next one's customer service. So a couple things on this one. The first is we have come up with Joseph has worked to come up with I worked with him to come up with a customer satisfaction index, CSI, which is meant to quantify on a month-to-month basis the amount of complaints and commendations that we get, kind of assigning a weighted value to complaints that's negative and a weighted value to commendations that's positive. Commendations are weighted a little bit more than complaints just because they're less common. So it's obviously the higher the value, the better. So you can see August was a great month. We had 96.5. Right below that, you can see the last 5 months where we kind of ranged from 80 to 96. The goal is to be above 80. I think we may be slightly below that in September. We'll have that to share with you next month, but it does kind of vary. So it's kind of a good metric to show us how we're doing in terms of complaints and commendations. You can also see valid complaints per 10K boardings. We try to normalize our number of complaints against the ridership. If you have more riders, more boardings, you expect there may be more complaints. So that attempts to show that. And you can see for the last 3 months, we've seen a downward trend in terms of valid complaints per 10,000 boardings. You can see at the bottom center, it shows complaints by type. We picked the 3 most common complaints that we hear with scheduled hearings, unsafe driving, missed stops. And then the other kind of captures some of the other items that we might hear. So we kind of keep an eye on those to see if there are any trends. And again, we'll be looking at this as a senior leadership team on a monthly basis as well. So if we see a number pop up there, certainly we'll talk about that and see if we can address it. But then you see just other stats there. Average resolution time of complaints, 4 days, which is good. The green check marks are meant to indicate that's a good result. If it were to rise, I think for like the resolution, if it were to rise above 7, that would have a red box around it. So just some additional visual cues to let you guys know.
What's a valid complaint? Is that one that you can verify with using video on board or looking at the bus?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, Joseph and operations work together to kind of review the incident and make sure that, if a pattern happened, they can verify it happened.
Ballpark, how many invalid complaints do you get in a month? I'm just trying to understand, is there a pattern or what's causing people to make complaints that then either we can't, are there issues in verifying them, or are there issues in that, we have people who maybe just have a sort of grievance against Dash and are just for a particular employee perhaps and are causing them to call it. I'm just curious, because we've never had it broken down like that before, so I've never thought about our complaints.
Thank you for the question. So invalid complaints would be because we didn't get all the information we needed, or it could be that we investigated it and found out that it's not valid. So it could be any of those reasons.
And I realize it fluctuates, but can you give me a range sort of what might be an average month or invalid? I'm curious, are we having more invalid complaints than we have valid complaints? Or
yeah, so some months you will get maybe about half of them being invalid. Some other months you will get fewer. It's not, like standard, but sometimes you have more invalid and sometimes you have a little bit less invalid. But normally, like I said, it comes out of because we don't have enough information to process them, or because we investigated and found out that it's not valid. But normally, I would say on the average, you will have about half of them in invalid.
Okay. And if somebody complains, say that an operator was speeding, let's say, I mean, you can't, because you can't see anything on a camera that's gonna show that the operator was going, say, 10 miles, 5 miles over the speed limit. I mean, how would you verify something like that, for example?
Yeah, actually, we can verify that.
You can, so it records the
We can,
speed.
yes.
Oh, okay.
We can verify that. We can verify, and we get a lot of those. That he was going too slow, he was going too fast, and we'll verify. Sometimes it's true, other times it's not.
How long does the bus save that data, though? I mean, how long do you have that available? That's new to me. That's just. We can have an offline conversation about it. I don't want to hold up the meeting, but it's something I'm interested in because it's something I didn't really realize you could track. But
So the actual determination of that is done by operations and sometimes by safety people. I don't actually do the those investigations. So when the complaints come in, we will send it to them. They will investigate and let us know. No, he was not, or he was. It's valid or it's invalid.
It's like an overwrite period of the hard drive on the bus.
Okay.
It's been 30 days.
30 days, about 30 days. And if we have video, we have speed, we have turn signal usage, we have brake usage. We have sudden stops, those kinds of things are all recorded by the accelerometer on the bus. So you get quite a bit of data, but if Joseph gets a complaint that's 20 days old and it doesn't specify a bus, we have no way. So that would, right, Joseph? I mean, it would be, the driver was driving down King Street and they were going too fast. There's how many hundreds of buses going down King Street? You ultimately have to call it invalid because you can't.
And you get a lot of those. You get a lot of those. They will make general statements like dash is not being on time or stuff like that. There's no specificity to it, so it's hard to track the particular event they're talking about. And we try and get back with them to give us more information. Sometimes they do, and we're able to determine what happened. Sometimes they're not.
I have a question for this CSI, the index. How compatible is that with? Is that a universal index that you can kind of look at your peers and say you're doing better and all that? Is that just specific to?
That's specific.
So we can't just tell that, oh, in Virginia, among all the, 26, 28 agencies are doing better than there's no such.
Right, we could potentially calculate that based on, if they post complaints, accommodations, but it might be difficult. I think for now, we're just going to be looking at kind of an average of how we're doing and set our target based on that. That's
good to know. Just for some insight, as and the board and I have talked about data and data collection over the years, and we've often agreed that comparing ourselves against ourselves is the best place to be, because everyone has different environments and everyone has different number of vehicles, and some of them are contract operations, some of them are operated in-house. So the industry benchmarks years ago, I mean, when I first started, we were providing industry benchmarks and they didn't seem to really make any sense interpreting the data. So our goal here is to build a history for Dash to be able to understand trends of what we're doing and better understand, if we're headed the right direction or the wrong direction against ourselves.
So you can measure your investments and see how they.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
And I would just add, some of these are new metrics like the CSI. So as we go forward, we're not able to track it as well retroactively, but as we go forward, we'll have more trend lines and more better information on how we're doing on the long run. And this is the last dashboard, the ridership, slightly different version of what you saw last month, but it does have the August 2022 data. So you can see that we're averaging just over 13.6 thousand weekday boardings, almost 10,000 Saturday mornings, and 7,000 Sunday, which are all basically double what we had for August 2021. So more than double. So really great to see that. The bar graph in the middle shows those values of the last 12 months. You can see how we trended with that dip in January and February from Omicron. You have the route by route ridership on the right, and then I just call your attention to the bottom right is boarding revenue hours is the metric that we commonly use. It compares the number of raw boardings against the amount of service that you're operating, so the number of revenue hours So if you're running more buses, running more trips, you'd expect to have more ridership as a result of that. So kind of normalize it against that. So 15.3 is a good, boardings per revenue per hour. It's 76% higher than the same month last year. So you can see that we're not only growing in terms of ridership, just as raw ridership, but also relative to the amount of service. So that's a good measure of cost efficiency and productivity. Any other questions on the dashboards?
Martin, I had a question about that one. How do you guys measure round trip boardings without like the fare card? Like, how do you know that the person is gone one way and then come back the next way without tracking them on a fare card?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So yeah, we don't have the fare cards anymore. So there's no ability to track individual users. The only thing we can do is that, every time they board the bus, it's a single boarding. So if you're doing a round trip, it does count as 2 boardings.
But how do you know they're doing a round trip?
You really don't know that data, but you kind of, I would say 95 to 98% are kind of going round trip. So usually it's pretty safe to assume that if they go one way, that
makes sense.
Not always, but for the most part.
Thank you.
Okay, well, the last thing was just one final ridership graph. It's a more detailed version of a chart that you guys have seen before. Usually we just have the last 4 years, but here we show the last, 7 years. So you can see that, the green year was FY22 when we launched the new network. See the star there. We did have the dip in January due to Omicron, but we didn't see that overall upward trend. The red line is FY23, the first 2 months there. So you can see in August, we had 378, almost 379,000 riders, which was the most of any single month in these last 7 years. You have to go all the way back to August 2015 to have a better number than that. So just want to put in some additional context of how well the ridership is doing. So that's the ridership update. Happy to take any questions.
And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I would say this is without the federal workforce going in every day as they used to. And this is without us seeing the King Street trolley rebound to pre-pandemic levels as far as tourism. So if both of those things were back to normal, the way we saw them pre-pandemic, one could imagine where that FY23 number would be off of this chart. Pre-pandemic on the trolley, we were carrying 1 million people a year, about 1 million people a year. So just really, really immensely proud of the performance of the system as a whole, from the investments. And I think this is a chart that really speaks, mountains to what has happened as a result of the new network and fare-free services. And by the way, the dashboards, while I have the floor, the dashboards will be the live dashboards that will end up on the website. So as they get updated, the website will automatically update, and they'll be fed also to other sources, including facility monitors and whatnot, so staff can see real time what's going on with them. They're not just print.
They will also have archives on the website, so you can go back and see past months dashboards. So that is a perfect segue for when you talk about the new website.
Good evening again. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce you to the Redesign website that launched the evening of October 9th, which was this past Sunday. The new bus.com, it provides new and improved features and introduces a more mobile friendly experience for our users. One of the biggest features and changes, as you can see from the homepage, vital rider information like the real-time route status there on the left side, and trip planner, schedules and maps, and service alerts there on the right are all at the top of the page, making that information highly visible and easier to access. I want to call your attention to the route status. Some of you may be familiar with DC Metro Hero on social media. They're a very vocal transit advocate in the area. They've created a software that actually measures schedule adherence. They've been using it for quite some time now. And since that technology existed, we thought that it would be a good idea to provide that information directly on our website to our users. the software that they use, it measures the percent, Murat, this is for you because I don't know numbers. It measures the percent of most recent bus stop visits that were observed to have occurred between 2 minutes early and 7 minutes late compared to their scheduled departure time. So for the green that you'll see considered on time, that means more than 75% of our buses were leaving their bus stop on time, according to that software. Yellow indicates between 50% and 75% of our buses were leaving on time. Again, that's that 2 minutes early to 7 minutes late span of time. And then red would indicate below 50%. So you've got on time, minor delays are yellow, major delays are red, and those are the metrics that are used to judge that. We also do have gray, as you'll see, for the 103 and 104. That either indicates that the route isn't currently operating. So for example, the King Street trolley operates between 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. So outside of those hours, the website would show that in gray. Or there isn't enough data to make a determination. So those are the two times that you'll see those boxes grayed out. I also want to call your attention to service alerts there at the top right. Right now it's red because of the Potomac Yard opening delay. So that calling attention to what's going on with our service or transit service in the area. When there is no active alert, that space is actually blue like the rest of the menu. So not to call attention to it or alarm people, but we wanted to make sure, especially with the, one of the new features that we wanted to make sure we included was to make it very obvious when there was some type of service alert going on with our system. And then down the page, I just want to call your attention underneath the carousel there. There's a link to subscribe to our newsletter, a link to view the entire system map, and then a link for safety and travel tips. So while not quite as important as the information is way at the top of the page, that is vital information for our passengers as well. So we wanted to make that easy to view. And then going down further on the page, we have the latest news and updates, events, and then information on the King Street trolley that you don't see on the screenshot. So overall, the design is much cleaner, much simpler, and easier to navigate as opposed to the previous website. I also would like to call your attention to About Us there at the top. Most of this information is very similar to what we had on the previous version of the website, but I do want to point out a couple of features that you can see under there. And if you're using the mobile version, you'd actually click the hamburger menu on the right, and those options will be available to you. Board of Directors is, of course, a page that I want to mention to you all, because previously there were actually two separate pages. There was one page that had all of the board information, and there was a separate page that had the meetings and meeting documentation. We've consolidated those pages so that people don't have to go to multiple locations. It's all under Board of Directors in one location. And then I also want to call your attention also under About Us are the performance reports that Martin just showed you and Josh mentioned. That's where those reports live. It's actually currently under About Us. The reports that Martin just shared are actively there and viewable and downloadable on that page. I also would like to call your attention to Rider Tools, which is on the blue bar, the blue Rider menu bar. That is a lot easier to access and includes some updated information. We have recently revised our passenger code of conduct and our bike and ride policies. So that is easily accessible under Rider Tools for anyone who is interested, along with our holiday service schedule and winter weather service maps and details. And then lastly, I just want to mention the trip planner. So right beside route status in the carousel is the trip planner. So once that is actually a clickable link. So once you click that button, there's a pop-up that shows up on the home page where you can enter your start and end location. And it will actually take you here. So this is much more accessible. much easier to use, and much more accurate, than the information that we previously had on the website. And I'd also like to call your attention to the filter there below the start and end date, which is where you can put more detailed information like when you want to depart, what time, that sort of thing. So I just want to take a second to say thank you to the Dash staff because they provided a lot of input to make this website better. Also to our advisory committee because they provided a lot of input as well to make this a better website. And I also want to give a special thank you to Tristan and Caitlin for technical support and writing support because they put a lot of hours into this too to make this possible. So just thank you. And I hope that you enjoy the website. And when you get a chance, please take a look, peruse through. We are always happy to hear your feedback and we want to continue to make this website better and more user friendly. So if there's anything that you ever see or would like to suggest, please let us know. That's all I have.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
great.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you, Whitney.
It's great.
And this was done entirely in-house, is what I understood. That's great. It's really great. I was just tooling around while you were speaking. I don't like my pictures so much, but
Yeah.
the board of directors site is very good. It's nice to have the information there. You should see all of your pictures there. Here. All right, that comes to the end of our business items for the night. Is there any other business the board needs to consider? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Matt, your second, Linda. All in favor?
Aye.
Next meeting Wednesday, November 2nd, November 9th in this location. 5:30.
Thank you.